So, the first function, right? Who's confused as to what I'm doing right now? Can everybody see the board? You guys in the back. You guys can see it? Who's confused by this? Anybody? This is an ES6 way to write a function. It is the same thing as doing this, right? Almost the same thing, but it still defines a function, right? This one's declaring a function using the function keyword, and this one is declaring a variable that's called myIndexOf and assigning its value to be an anonymous function, okay? I will most likely always be writing functions this way, okay? So I'll get used to it. So myIndexOf is going to take three things, one of which is optional, right? So we can do a source, and we can do a search value, and then we can do a start index, okay? So, the start, index of is an actual string method, right? You can dot off any string and do this string, ABC, dot index of letter A, and it'll give you index 0, because all strings are made up of indexes, right? Indices. So, if you can tell index of where you want it to start in the string. However, if you don't tell it where to start, it will just start from the beginning. So that means that whoever's going to run your function, myIndexOf, has the option to pass in this last value. However, if they do pass it in, our logic has to change, right? We have to start where we're looking in the string from where that person is telling us. So, how do we know that start index is being passed in or not? What is a parameter's value if it is not assigned anything by an argument?
Undefined.
Exactly, right? So you can easily just do, let me just make this taller. So you can easily just do if start index is triple equal to the value undefined. Then we could just reassign start index to 0. So now we will always go, after everything now below this if statement will go as according to plan, referencing start index all the way through, and we know that it will be the right value. If it was passed in, it will not be undefined, so it will never be reassigned to 0. If it was not passed in, it will be undefined, and then we assign it to 0. So we will start at the beginning of the string. However, I want to do it this way. This is also ES6, okay? By putting this in the function definition, start index equals 0, right there, right? Equal sign 0. That's it. That is doing the exact same thing. If this was never passed into the function, it will automatically be assigned to 0. Yeah.
If you don't set up the function the ES6 way, just like titling out function, can you still do the equal 0?
Yeah. Yeah. This is nice and clean, right? Isn't this so much cleaner than doing this? Imagine we had to look at all three of these, right? All three of these are optional arguments, optional parameters, right? So I would have to do 3 separate if statements. But I can just do this, right? Not bad. So see, this problem is actually not that hard, but the reason why it is hard and tricky for some people is because you are not starting your for loop at 0 and going to the end of the string, which is usually what people do, right? They get into the habit. It's like, okay, I'm going to start at the beginning of the string. I'm going to go to the end. I'm going to loop through the whole thing. I'm going to look for this. That's not the case this time, right? So instead, we'll do for let I equal what? Start, right? Start index. And then we'll say I is less than or equal to source dot length minus search value dot length. And then we'll do I++. I messed something up. Why is this? Huh? Do you see a typo anywhere? What? Let I equal start index, I is less than the source dot length, minus search value dot length, I is plus.
Start all over.
What is going on right now?
It doesn't like the comments.
Oh, the comments are fine. Comments are comments. Okay, let's do this again. 4, let I, it's going to be equal to start index. I less than or equal to source dot length minus search value dot length I plus plus. That's what I have. All right, whatever. So that was weird. So we start where we are asked to start, or where we are assigning it at 0, right? It's either going to be 0 or whatever the person is putting into the function, right? And then, why are we stopping here? It's because index of doesn't actually take like one character, okay? It can take an entire sentence. It can take multiple characters, right? So why would we continue increasing I when we know that it can't fit anymore at the end of the sentence? We just want to stop when we know that there can't be anything, right? If I have a string that says example, and I'm looking for amples, right? As soon as I hit this X, it's not amples, but when I go to the A, I know that there's no more space in it. There's no more space left in that string to search, right? So we can just stop the loop early. Does everyone agree? That makes sense, right? That was a bad example. Anyway, so we can say let substring equal source.slice of I to I plus search value dot length. Who here is not familiar with the slice method? So, slice method takes, no, not 1 to I. Sorry. So I forgot, most methods take a certain number of optional arguments. However, and slice, all of them are optional. If you pass nothing into slice, what you get is the exact same string. The first argument tells you the start index. And the start index is always inclusive, okay? So substring will be wherever I is in the string, will be including that character, nothing before it and everything after it. Then the second one tells you where to stop, but that's not inclusive, okay? If we stop at the end of here, that character won't be included in the substring, okay? So the first argument is inclusive and the second argument is exclusive, okay? And it basically clones a part of your string. You can tell it where to start and stop in the middle of a string, take it out, and then you put it in this variable substring. So now that we have this substring, we can say if substring is equal to search value, right? Because that's what we're looking for. Then what do? We have to return I. We are looking at the index of where we're starting, okay? Where we're starting. We have where we're starting, and we know where we're stopping. It's however long this thing is. It's either one character or more, right? So we have the substring, we see if it matches that, and we know where we started that slice, so that's where the index is. Then, if we make it through this whole loop, and we don't find anything, we never hit this if statement, then we return -1. Common patterns in problems that usually require you to loop through an entire something, whether it be a string or array. You don't know arrays yet, don't worry. But common patterns is if you have to look through something, you're looking for something. And if you find that one thing, you have to return it. You're usually going to want an if statement inside of your for loop that will return that something. And that if statement should be very specific. Because return keywords stop the function entirely. They don't stop only the loop. They stop the whole function, right? So if we find that thing, return that thing immediately. Then the second return statement should go outside of the loop, right? Because when the loop is done, we've looked through the whole thing. We know that it can't be in here. So then we're just done, we return -1. Because there is no -1 index. You have a question?
I was just going to say, for example, on line 9,
Yeah.
yes, it's a semantics thing. So I saw in the video he's not including the curly brackets.
So,
He's just putting return I.
yeah, so I do this. I mean, you don't have to do this. So you could do this as well. So this is shorthand. So if the thing that is going inside of your if statement or else if statement or else statement is only one line, you can omit the curly brackets, you can omit the code block, and you can just put it here like this. I chose to do it the other way because it's just like more explicit to see exactly what I'm doing, especially for you guys. But this is definitely possible, okay? So you could do it like that. Nope. Or you could do it like this. Okay?
What about using truth feed? Also possible?
Excuse me?
Truth feed.
What do you mean?
It's something like without the if statement, just checking.
Well, you have to check if this specific thing is a true statement or not. You have to see if the substring is the search value. There's no like, truthiness isn't really involved in this. Any questions on this before I do most vowels?
Can you just say one more time why you did source that length minus the search value that length? Why you subtracted the length of the search value?
Like, imagine we said let example.
Do you need to do that?
No, you don't need to do that.
Okay.
However, it's like, let's say example, right, is equal to this is a test, right? And like, if we console.log, let me scroll up for you guys. Console.log example.length, it's 14, right? So if we console.log example at 13, we would get the t, right?
Yeah.
Right? So if we were looking for something that was like, if we were looking for like, exam, you know, we would get here and say,
Yeah.
but like when we get here, we would be checking for something that's over here, right? So what's example at 14? Undefined. If you try to access something in a string an index in a string that's greater than its length, it will be undefined. So as you're looking for this whole thing, you'll end up, when you're at the T, you'll be looking at really test, undefined, 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 right? So there's no point to go further, you know? It's just like faster. But yeah, you don't need to, because it won't be equal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it won't be the search value anyway, so, yeah. Well, this looks confusing. Any other questions? Not bad, right? Most vowels? Let's do it. Most vowels, most vowels, most vowels. So let me comment this out. sentence. Sentence. So I feel like when you guys are starting out, I feel like it's hard to think about how to tackle problems, right? So let's talk about this from a higher point of view. So most vowels we want to loop through a single string that's made up of words, right? So a normal sentence, right? And we want to count each word's vowels, and then we want to return. What do we return? Do we return the word or the vowel count? The word. Okay, so we have to return the word. So we know that we have to somehow write a program that keeps track of all of the words we pass, count each of their vowels, and compare it to each and every one until we find the one with the most. So we can do that by setting 4 variables, right? We can do this by looping through this thing once, seeing where there's a break in a word, where we're starting a new word, store that current word somewhere, count that current word's vowels, check to see if it's more than our max vowel counter, our over result variable, right? And then replace that variable with the current count and the current word. Okay? Right? Everyone gets it? So let me show you what I mean. So let current word, nope, equal an empty string. Let current count equal 0. Let max word equal an empty string. And let max count equal 0. We start everything out as 0 and an empty string, right? Because we don't have any words yet, so it's an empty string. And we don't have any vowels yet, so the count is 0 for everything, right? Current word and current count will be reset every time we see a new word. Max word and max count will hold like the winners, right? As soon as we see one with more vowels, these things will be replaced with that word, okay? So, let's start. First thing we're going to do, obviously, is we're going to loop through the sentence, right? So for let I equals 0, I is less than sentence dot length I plus plus. So now, first thing we should do is check to see if we're not at a space or at the end of the sentence. Because at the end of the sentence is a period, okay? So we can do if sentence at I is not equal to a space. If it's not equal to a space, then it can't be at the, it has to be in the middle of a word, right? But we also have to check I is not equal to sentence dot length minus 1. Because we don't want to be at the end, right? So now we can just do current word plus equals sentence of I. So we are saying, okay, we're still in the middle of a word, so we're going to put this into our current word. So if we have this sentence, right? It's just 2 words, right? Most vowels. We'll start at the M. We'll check to see if it's a space, and if it's not, we'll check to see if it's not a space, and to see if it's not at the end of the sentence. And if it's not, it's an M, so we'll put it into current word. Then we'll go to the next, I will increment, and we'll go to the O. And we'll check to see if that's not a space, and if we're not at the end, and we'll put that into current word. So now it's Mo, right? And we'll go, and we'll go, and we'll go, until we hit this space. Because then this if statement won't be fulfilled, okay? Does everyone see how this will get us a word? Right? Okay. But before we handle the else, like else we are at the space, before we handle that, we have one more thing to do, okay? we have to check if that character that we're adding into the current word is a vowel, right? So we could say if is vowel. What am I doing? Usually, when we have to do something that isn't really in line with the task of the function, right? Like, we want to make something called a helper function. It's just easier, right? I can put in a bunch of lines in the middle of this function that will return true or false if the character is a vowel or not, or I could take it out of the function and keep it separate because the goals are separate, right? So it would make sense to do this is vowel thing outside of the function, right? It would make sense to say make it sense to do it over here, right? And it takes in a single character. And we'll pass this sentence of I. And all this function is going to do is return true or false if that character is a vowel or not. So now we can say let vowels equal A, E, I, O, U, right? And we could say return return vowels at vowels.index of car dot to lowercase is not equal to -1. Did that in one line. Okay? Vowels.index of, so we're going to look through vowels and we're going to look for this character, but before we do that, we're going to make it lowercase. Car.to lowercase invoked. That is a string method, right? So, because in A, lowercase or uppercase, they have different character codes. They have different values. They're not the same thing, okay? They may look like the same letter to you, but they're not to computers, right? So if we had a capital A in here, and we just look for the index of that capital A, that's not in here, okay? So we have to, before that, make this into a lowercase a. And then we check to see if it's not equal to -1. If it's not equal to -1, that means it's 0 through whatever, and it's in here, okay? If it is -1, that means it's not in there, so it's not a vowel. Does that make sense? So now that I wrote this function out here, I just put that in that if statement and pass in sentence of I. Just throw sentence of I, that current character, down into isVal. Isval will return the result of this, which is either true or false.
Yeah.
Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Does it matter that you put it beneath the for loop or above?
It does matter if I used const. Okay? But the function keyword is different. I forgot which lesson we talk about hoisting, but it's not this lesson, so don't worry about that. But if you want to put like all these little functions where you're doing all these weird things, right? Like, oh, is this letter a vowel, you know? You can put all of those at the bottom of your page so you don't have to think about them, but always declare them with the function keyword, okay? Because if you declare them with a const, then you'll get a weird error, undefined is not a function, okay? And we'll talk about that another time. So, anyways, so now if we have the vowel, if that's true, right? We can just do current count plus plus, right? Got one. And we just add it to the current count. So now we can write our else, right? Any questions? Does everyone know what the else is going to be? Else, it is a space. Or else we're at the end, right? We're at our last word. So now we're at a space, so that means that current word and current count should be the last word we just passed, and it should be the number of vowels that was in that last word, right? If our logic works, then that should be the case, right? So we can just do if current count is greater than max count. If current count is greater than max count, then max count is now going to be current count. And we could say max word is going to be current word. Outside of the if, we have to do current word is equal to empty string, and current count is equal to 0. And then out here, we return max word.
Max word is equal to current count, I think.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you're right. My bad. Current word. Nice. So, else, we check to see that current word that we had, right, that we captured in our loop. We check to see if that count of that word is bigger than the max count that we had. Only then, if that's true, we will change max count. It should be changed the first time, right? Because it starts out at 0, and if we had a word, it would have at least one value, right? So then it will change, the current count will now be updated, and the max word will also be updated, which is the thing we want to return at the end, right? But even if this wasn't true, even if it wasn't bigger, we still have to reset current word and current count. Because the next iteration, with i's incremented at the bottom of the loop, we will be starting a new word. So the current word should be blank and the current count should be nothing until we hit a val.
Should you put that under the if then also?
What do you mean?
Because if the current count is greater than the max count, would it not go to that reset? Because that would be
This?
Yeah.
It will go to this reset because this isn't inside of an else statement.
Oh, I see.
So I have this big else statement out here that has all of this logic inside of it, right? Then I have this if statement. If this is true, then these two lines run.
Oh, and then no matter what.
No matter
run.
what,
Okay.
exactly. No matter what, these will run. Any questions? Yeah.
Just for my own peace of mind, because I was trying it this way, could this be done by splitting the string out into an array of separate words and then checking each word?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, for sure.
I
But
couldn't
I mean,
figure it out. But
no. Yeah, you
Yeah.
could do that. You could do that for sure. I mean, we haven't covered arrays yet, so don't worry about this. But you just always have to be wary of built-in methods because you don't actually know what they're doing, right? Right now, what you do know is like, yeah, you pass in one thing and you get one thing. But like, what split is actually doing is it's looping through the entire string and putting everything into an array. Right?
yeah.
So like, if you split and then join again, that's like 3 loops.
Yeah.
Whereas this is 1 loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's slow. So if you don't need to do that, don't. If you think you like to work with arrays more than strings because they are easier to work with, then yeah, do that first and then switch back or something like that, you know? Always try to solve the problem like in a brute force way, even if you know it's like the worst way possible, because solving it is the most important thing. You can work later on cutting it down, removing lines. You know what I mean? Yes.
Question. Does this include the single quote apostrophe? Like if
Well,
you search,
so like all these things like commas and apostrophes and things like that, we will always get in here,
Mhm.
and it will be added to the current word, but that's not a vowel. So it doesn't affect our problem.
it will look through the.
It will keep going as normal, but it won't count it as a vowel, right? Because that apostrophe is a character, and it will be checked down here.
But it will not cause issue.
It won't cause an issue.
Okay. So the second thing, last one. So if I go,
Oh, sure.
if in a PDF file, I might have 100,000 characters.
Yeah.
Would this method also be effective as opposed to using
No, I mean we probably find a better way to do
arrays
this.
or other?
Um,
Because the array takes longer, as you mentioned. With
No, if it's like 100,000 words, then you wouldn't want to split it into an array.
So what would you recommend? What's the best practice?
I guess this. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to loop through the whole thing anyway. You have to go through each word. So, and if you have like 100,000 words, you only want to do it once. You can't skip anything, right? So you have to do everything once. So this is the fastest way to do that. Yeah.
Would you mind slacking out this answer?
Yeah. You guys are all gonna get this Slack. Isn't that crazy? I mean this REPL. You're gonna get Slack the REPL. And it's gonna be in the GitHub. Don't worry about it. Okay? So can I move on to coercion and truthiness? Today's topic. And if you struggled with the for loop workshop, relax. That is one of the harder workshops, okay? And maybe, just maybe, after we get to the weekend, maybe go back and do the for loop workshop if you struggled and see if you did any better, right? Redo workshops, that's how you get the most out of this course. Okay? But seriously, don't stress out if you really struggled with it, okay? It's not that big of a deal. Sure, other people definitely struggled with it, so just don't feel like you're alone, okay? So, coercion. And truthiness. So, what do I mean by coercion? What do I mean by coercion? So, in JavaScript, there are certain primitive data types, right? Strings, booleans, numbers, undefined, null, okay? So, these are all their own types, right? Like type string. So if I had like const, well, I'll just do everything like that. So let string equal hello there, right? And then I have let num equal 1001, okay? If I console.log type of string, I get string. And if I console.log type of num, I get number. And if I console.log type of false, I get boolean, okay? These are all types, okay? So when I say coercion, I mean type coercion, meaning I can change a certain value's type. And there's two types of coercion. There's explicit coercion and implicit coercion. So I'll talk about explicit coercion first because it's kind of easier to understand, right? So let's say I got rid of this, and let's say that this was the number 55. Well, the string of the 5 and 5 character, okay? This is still a string. So if I console.log the type of that string, I would still get string. But it does look like a number, and it looks like that could be coerced into a number, right? Because as a human, this is a number, right? So if I did, I'll just console.log this for you. Capital number, invoke it, and I pass in string. I get 55. But what is that type? Number. So we have number, we have string, and we have boolean. Okay? You can pass in a 55 here. You can pass in true here, and you can pass in 100 here, right? And if I console.log every single one, should have done that first. Let me get rid of this and this. So we see 55 true and true. But if I console.log the type of these things, we see a number, a string, and a Boolean. Explicit means that I, as a programmer, want this value to be coerced into this value, okay? I am telling it to do that. And I do that using these global objects, the global number object, the global string object, and the global Boolean object, okay? You invoke them and pass in a value into them. Let's say I wanted to coerce ABC into a number. That's a number, right? No, it's not. Oh, sorry. It is NaN, not a number. NaN stands for not a number. It is falsity. It is an error. Okay, it is wrong. Also, the type of not a number is number. I don't know why. Don't ask me that. Okay. So if you try to coerce something that can't be coerced into a number, it will throw an error, NaN, okay? Coercing but you can coerce anything into a string. Strings are easy, okay? Everything gets coerced into a string. Everything can also be coerced into a Boolean, okay? We'll go over that in a little bit. But I just wanted to also show you quickly shorthand to coercing these things, okay? So let's say I have let's num equal 100. And then I console.log empty string plus num. I would get, what am I doing? Let num equal 100? Oh, whoops. I get 100, right? But the type is actually a string. Okay? This just looks like you're adding, like how we were just doing with the most vowels function, you know, like putting this string into an empty string, putting that together, and then you get the word, right? This is the same thing, right? But you can put this number in here, no problem. And what you get is 100, but it's coerced into a string, right? Does that make sense? It seems less like type coercion and more just like simple addition to a string, right? However, another shorthand thing that I wanted to show you is this. So if I said let string equal 100, and I say, I do plus 100, and I console.log type of string, I get number. Just adding a plus in front of something is shorthand for coercing something into a number. Okay? You don't have to write the number, capital number, and pass it. You just throw plus this, and then it's a number. Okay? Just wanted to show you that. Yeah. Oh.
I was explaining myself. So any plus you will add to the string will do the number.
Well, if you just threw a plus in front of a value, it will try to coerce that thing into a number, right? So if I did undefined, what would string be? Not a number. You know? It behaves the same way. Any questions?
What's parse? It says something like parse integer or parse.
Like, I mean, parse is just, I'm not a dictionary, I don't know. To analyze into parts and describe their syntactic roles. That's what parse means. You can use parse for like anything. Like parsing a string is like going through the string and like removing some characters and changing them to something. I don't know, you know, like parsing a number into a string, changing it into a string, you know? Does that work? Okay. So now I want to talk about some other stuff. So let's do this. What do you guys think this will be? Whoops. True or false?
False.
Right. True or false?
True.
Right. So this is the main difference between the double equal operator and the triple equal operator. I really don't really advise you to use the double equal operator because I don't really see a real value for it, right? In no way, shape, or form will you ever be writing a function where you think that this should be this. Okay? Double equals coerces types for you before comparing them. Whereas triple equals does not do that. Triple equals is a strict equals, okay? So as you can see, 55, the string, the character 55, is not the same thing as the integer 55, okay? But what double equals is doing is it's coercing that 55, the number, into a string and then comparing, okay? So this, don't do this, or you will pay, okay? Everything. Your careers. No, I'm just kidding. So that's a quick thing. Also, I just wanted to quickly go over concatenation. Like, if I did console.log 100 plus empty string, no, plus 50 plus 100, what would I get, right? I would get 10050 as a string. So what is going on here? I have this number 100, and I'm adding, order of operations is left to right, right? So I'm adding the string 50 to 100. If you add anything to a string, the other thing that isn't a string will be coerced into a string. So that's why we see 150 together like that, and not 150 the number, okay? Yeah.
If you put the 50 as a string in the end.
If I put this 50 as a string in the end, mess that up, then I would get 200 and then the 50. Because here we're doing the 100 plus 100 is 200, right? Number plus number is 200, right? But then we add it to the string. So that's why, in order of operations, if that string was at the beginning, that means everything is being concatenated onto the back of it like a string. Does that make sense? I feel like that is pretty logical, right? Any questions?
So whatever it comes after that string is a string.
Exactly. So if I had a million other numbers, it would be 200 and then all of the numbers, you know, in a long line.
But what about if you say wherever you are
Yeah.
is plus 50, and then in parentheses 2 times 3 times
Wait, what do you want me to do?
plus 2 times 3.
56.
You get the 6. So because of order of operations, we do everything inside of the parentheses first, right? So this will be multiplied into a 6, but then that 6 will still be added onto this mongoloid string.
The pandas come into play.
Yes, sir. So yeah, this is just something you could play around with in your spare time if you want to. Okay? So now I just want to talk about, before I go into the slides quickly, I want to talk about truthiness, okay? So you might have heard people say truthiness this or falsiness, true, false. Truthiness and true is not the same thing. True and false are values, okay? True is a value and false is a value. Truthiness. If I say something is truthy, that means that that value, if it were to be coerced into a Boolean, it would be true. If something is falsy, if it were to be coerced into a Boolean, it would be false. That's what truthiness and falsiness are, okay? And you've been using these things without knowing them, okay? Like if I do if true console.log, here I am. Why is there a true there? Oh, I get here I am, right? If true. If true, right? If true equals true. We get it, right? So everything that goes in here should be true, right? However, that's not actually the case. Whatever's in there, if it's truthy, then the if statement will run. Because the if statement coerces whatever goes inside of its parentheses into a Boolean, and then it determines whether it should run the if statement or not. So, that being said, will this statement run? Yes, because 100 is truthy. So the if statement coerces it into a Boolean, which is true, and then runs. If null, will this run? No. Because null coerced into a Boolean is false. There are not that many falsy values, and there are a lot of truthy values, because every single number is truthy, okay? That's why there's a lot of truthy values. Also, any string with length is truthy, okay?
Oh, sorry, but I'm confused. You said every single number.
Except 0. Except 0. 0 is falsy, okay? 0 is falsy. An empty string is falsy. Undefined is falsy. Null is falsy. Not a number is falsy, okay?
Negative numbers are truthy.
Negative numbers are truthy. Here I am. Okay? So when I say truthiness, this is what I mean. Any questions? Is everyone okay? Yeah.
What if we use the not?
I will get into that right now, Anton. You've read my mind. Now we will talk about some operators, okay? 4 operators I want to tell you about. 2 of them are kind of related, and the other 2 are kind of related. And then, so we have the bang operator, and then the double bang operator. So if I say console.log Boolean of Apple, right? What am I going to get? I'm going to get true. Because any string with length coerced into a Boolean is true, right? So I can do that, or I can do that. Bang, bang. Bang, bang. A bang is just an exclamation point, okay? So bang, bang, double exclamation point returns that thing's truthiness. It reflects the truthiness. So what if I did one bang? We get false. False also coerces that thing into a Boolean. However, it reflects the opposite of its truthiness, okay? So you might find this familiar, like not equals, right? We're just replacing this equal sign with the bang, right? This is the same thing. Not Apple, okay? Not true. So usually you would do this if you were looking for like an empty value, you know? Not null is true, right? Not true. That makes sense, right? But the bang operator and the double bang operator, you can think of them. What the hell just happened? You could think of them as shorthand for coercing values into Booleans, right? Just like the plus in front of the string would make it a number if it was. If you put the bang in front of a value, you get the opposite of its truthiness. If you put the double bang, you get its truthiness. Okay?
Do you ever find yourself using a double bang?
Yeah, sometimes. It's more explicit, you know? If you're like looping through things and it's like a lot of data or something, and you want to make sure that it is a truthy value. You want to coerce it into a Boolean first. You want to make sure that you're only dealing with Booleans, you know? It's an explicit way to do it, if you want it to. And then there's two more operators I wanted to talk to you about. It's the and the or operator. These are logical operators, right? So we can say if hello and there. And we'll console.log I am here, right? We get I am here. Because what the and is doing, it might just look like, okay, if both things are truthy, then it returns true, and then that's it. But that's actually wrong. This actually returns something, right? What do you think what am I is going to be? What do you think it's going to be? It's going to be hello. Exactly. And doesn't coerce anything. It doesn't coerce anything. Okay? It returns the last truthy thing. Or it returns the first falsy thing. Ah, this is weird, right? So if I did like and,
What about the opposite?
one second. And apples, and empty array, and true, what am I is still 0. Because and sees the falsy thing, and it says, okay, 0 and hello. The first falsy thing is 0, so it gets 0. Then it gets that 0 and compares it to apples. This is like pluses chained on together, right? These are operators, okay? So the 0 will be carried all the way over here. And it will remain the same if the 0 is in the front or the back. Yeah.
What if the 0 is somewhere in the middle?
Once we get it, well, that doesn't really help, actually. I put it like over here. God damn it. So if I put it over here, we still get 0 because it returns the last truthy thing or the first falsy thing, right? So hello and apples will return apples. Then we have apples and empty array. We get empty array. Then empty array and 0, the first falsy thing was the 0. So we get the 0. The 0 and true, we get 0.
An empty array is true or false?
Empty arrays are true. Empty objects are also true. Just some exposure. Okay? So, and can be very useful if you have like 6 variables and you want to make sure they're all have a value. They're all not undefined or they're all not 0 or something like that. So you can chain them together in if statements. Like if all of these things are truthy, then what this chain will produce will be a truthy value, right? Or once we find a falsy value, it will return that, and then that if statement won't be running. Does everyone see the logic behind this? Like, if this was a 0, I am here wouldn't be running anymore, right? We want to make sure all of these variables are truthy. And then, instead of the and operator, there is also the or operator, which is just these pipes. And now we do get I'm here because the opposite of and, the or operator returns the first truthy thing or the last falsy thing. Opposite, right? Let me write this down so y'all can stare at it for a while. And returns first falsy thing or last truthy thing, or returns first truthy thing or last falsy thing. So basically, this if statement will run as long as one of those things are truthy. If you're checking like 5 things, as long as one of those things is truthy, we will run this code. If all of them are false, then we won't, because it will return the last falsy thing. And it's just like this. What am I to will be hello, or null, or undefined, or empty string, or NaN. And console.log, what am I to? And what we get is hello. Because it returns the first truthy thing it finds. Works the same way. This might seem a little complicated and hard to remember at first, as all of this stuff might be a little complicated and hard to remember at first. That's because I just told you a lot of rules, okay? Type coercion is a rule. It is happening in your code whether you like it or not. Hence, implicit coercion. JavaScript does this for you behind the scenes whether you like it or not, okay? You can use it to your advantage and it can be very, very useful. Or, if you're not aware of this, it could harm you, okay? But it's important to be aware that things are actually being coerced behind the scenes. Like in if statements, and then the ands, and then the ors, the bangs, you know? Yeah.
Can you give us an example of when you would do that, the ors?
Like in this if?
Yeah.
Not off the top of my head. I feel like maybe you'll see an example in the workshop. Maybe. Yeah.
We use the single and in JavaScript.
Like just this?
Yeah. One.
I don't think so. Whoa, I forgot I did that. I think there's a bunch of different I think it could be like a bit operator. Yeah. So there's all these like bit operators that I really don't want to get into, and I don't want you to get into either. Okay. So there's all these bit operations, but don't worry about it, okay? Look into it if you want to.
Sounds like a mess.
So, any other questions? I will go into the slides. I'll breeze through the slides, and then we can take a little break, and then I'll slack out pairs, and we'll start the workshop. How does that sound? Does anybody feel really uncomfortable with this? It's okay if you are, and you don't want to raise your hand, because I know at least some of you might be. But it's fine, because all of these are rules, right? And rules take a while to memorize and to get used to, okay? But this will come naturally for you, okay? It really does, because it's used everywhere. Truthiness is used everywhere, okay? So relax. Relax. So yeah, we'll talk about types, explicit coercion, implicit coercion, concatenation, loose equality, coercion to Boolean, which values are truthy, conditional expressions, bang operators, logical operators. Oh my God. Look at all this stuff. So types. You've already seen the number, the string, the Boolean. These are all primitive types, okay? Other primitive types, null, undefined, and symbol. Don't worry about symbols. We're not talking about them in this course. There's new things that are introduced with ES6, okay? So we're not going to cover them. Don't worry about it. Types, we have complex or object types as well, like functions, arrays, and objects. You're going to be starting arrays, I think, with me on Wednesday. Okay? Arrays are cool, so don't worry about it. So this is just like a little, we'll explain this later, but there are major differences between primitive and complex types. Only complex types can be mutated, and we will talk about that later, okay? Primitive types are passed by value, and complex types are passed by reference. We will also cover this later, but this is just a little intro. If you feel really comfortable with what we're doing, maybe do your own research on what I really mean by the slide, okay? So we have explicit coercion, and coercion occurs when the type of value is changed to a new type. And explicit coercion happens when we use one of a built-in global objects to create a value of a new type. Like I showed you, we have the num10, console log type of num, and we see number on the first line up there, right? But then we say let string equal capital string, the global string object, and we pass in that variable num. Then we console.log string. It looks like 10 in the terminal, right, in the console. It doesn't look like anything else. It's just like, oh, nothing happened. When you look at the type, you console log the type, we actually change it to a string. Does that make sense? Everyone's cool on the global objects, right? If you open up REPL or you're in your CodePen, you use the console in CodePen, you can play around with it as much as you want. You can make anything you want. Coerce anything you want. Okay?
Coercion.
So explicit coercion happens when we use, well, this is the same thing, except this is different. Now we're using the global number object, right? We have the string 1000, and the type of that string is a string, and then we console.log num, which is that string passed into the global number object, right? And it looks like the same thing. However, the type is now a number. Behaves the same way as the global string object, right? Right? Nice. So implicit coercion also changes the type of a value, but unlike explicit coercion, implicit coercion is something that JavaScript does for us. This behavior can be very helpful, but it's important to know how it works, okay? The deeper you understand how things work behind this language, the more powerful of a programmer you can be, okay? It's important. So, we have let sum equal 10 plus 20, which is 30. So the concatenated string will be the string 10 plus the string 20. I'm not sure. The number 10 plus the string 20, what's that going to be? It's over there. So we have sum is going to be equal to 30. Concatenated string, you can't really see it because it's going off the screen, but it's 1020, right? Which is the string 1020, right? Not sure is also 1020. Why is that? It's because JavaScript is saying you're trying to add a number to a string, which doesn't make any sense. You can't do that, right? So it coerces this 10 into a string. That's all that's happening. Right? This isn't that complicated, right?
Or if you put any word into 20, like hello, or 10 hello.
Exactly. Because if you play around with strings in your REPL or whatever, you add whatever you want. It's just literally going to be a long concatenated string. Because everything as a character has a string value. Okay? So where does 20 come from? Notice the same values concatenating 10 and 20. The plus operator will implicitly coerce a number to a string if you try to add it to a string. So let will be a string 10 plus 20 plus 30 plus 40 plus 50, and then you see what we get over here. It is not what you would think it would be. It is literally all of the characters put together because it coerces the 20 into a string, and then you get 10, 20. Then it coerces the 30 into the string, and you get 10, 20, 30. Okay? And it goes on and on and on, no matter what you're going to add to it. If you add the value undefined, the value null, whatever, it will be coerced into a string. Okay? Any questions?
See if you say like 10 plus string plus a boolean, like
Yeah, then it'll be like the Boolean true. Like it will be like TRUE, but a string. Makes sense, right? Anything you put in the string will just be in the string, will be in the sentence, right? So as you can see here, we get a different answer there. Because the string is at the end. And order of operations, we start left to right. So we do 10 plus 20, which is plus 30, which is plus 40, which is, and then we get the 100, but then we get plus string 50. So we still get a string. The type of also be a string is string, but you see the string values are different than before. It's because where we put the string in the long list of operators. Right? Yeah. Nice. So, avoid using the double operator because it uses a large set of rules to implicitly coerce values to the same type before it compares them. So this is very important. It does this before it compares the values. So you're going to be getting an answer that you might not want, right? 10 double equals 10, true. Fine. 10 double equals string 10, true. That does make sense, but like, you know, it's not, you can see how it's cheating a little bit. The string true is equal to the Boolean true, which is false. The empty string double equals false. That's true. True double equals the string 1, which is true. Behind the scenes, in this last one, JavaScript coerced both of these values to numbers. True coerced into 1. Because if you think about it, true and false is really just 1 and 0. 1, 0. Yeah. So there you have it. This is why the double equal operator is really not supposed to be used ever. Like, don't use it ever. Okay?
Yeah, true and true is true.
I mean, don't use it.
Well, the second one, I don't see why it makes sense, the second one.
Because, the second one, it coerces this number into a string. Yeah, I think so. Unless it coerces it into a number. I don't know. I never looked into this stuff because it doesn't really matter why. Because you just don't use it, you know? It doesn't matter. Got a lot of things to think about, but not this. Just don't use the double equal sign, okay? This is really interesting, though, if you want to get into, like, the deep, like, the thickets of the language.
Is there any question with the double sign on the test?
No. Just don't use it. You shouldn't be using it on the test, you know?
You know, I will reject that question.
Oh, wait, what is this? So, right, so values can be coerced to Booleans true, and this is what I was talking about before, truthiness, right? So let new Boolean equal the global Boolean object, I am a string, and you get the value true, okay? It coerces that string into a Boolean, which is true, right? When coercing a value to Boolean, JavaScript uses rules to decide if a value should be coerced to true or false. Values coerced to true are called truthy, values coerced to false are called false. That makes sense, right? But you understand how truthy does not mean true. Truthy is an act. Truthy is this thing will be coerced. Then it will be true, okay? That's what truthy is, okay? Same thing with falsely, except with the Boolean false. Any questions? You could ask me questions whenever you want. Okay? Most values are truthy. As you can see, this string, I am a string, strings with length are truthy, right? So you get true. Boolean 10, any non-zero number is truthy, so you get true. This is an array. Talk about this on Wednesday. This is an array. An array of any length, including length 0, is truthy, okay? This is an object. So you see the curly braces here. Key value pairs. We will talk about that on Monday, Tuesday, because Monday we don't have class. These are also truthy. All objects are truthy, okay? So a lot of things are truthy. A lot. Every single array, every single object, every single string that has length, every single non-zero number, you know? So it's easier to talk about what is falsity. Just these, okay? These are what is falsity, plus false, but that doesn't really make sense. So the empty string, 0, null, undefined, and not a number, will all be evaluated to false if they were coerced into a Boolean. Okay? These things you need to memorize. Okay? This you have to be aware of. Yeah?
Why is an empty string false but an empty array?
Because it's like complex versus primitive, and we'll talk about that later. Okay? Empty strings, think of as null. Think of as nothing, no space. There is nothing here. Okay? Falsity. Remember these things, okay? Also, remember that 0 is falsity. That kind of does make sense, but also 0 is still a valid number, okay? So be careful. Just saying. When in doubt, console log. What is this? So recall how the conditional expression works. If 5, console.log in the if, else, console.log in the else, in the if. Right? I just showed you this before. What if the conditional expression evaluates to a non-Boolean value? We still get it because apples coerced into a Boolean is true, so apples is truthy, so if will run. Because the if statement is coercing that for you, anything inside of the parentheses. Does anyone disagree with this? Is anyone confused why this is happening?
Can you go back to the slide?
Yeah. This one?
Yeah.
This is the same thing, except instead of apples, we have 5, right? So 5 is not 0, right? So 5 coerced into a Boolean would be true, right? So if coerces that 5 into true, and we run in the if. Same thing as here, except with apples, because any string with length is truthy. Right? JavaScript will implicitly coerce the result of an expression in a conditional to a Boolean value. Like I just said. If 10, console.log yes, else no. If 0, console.log yes, else no. We get yes, no. The yes from here and the no from here. If 10, we coerce the 10 into true, and we get this yes. If 0, we coerce the 0 into false. If false, no. No. False, no. Else. False, elf. Coerce, false, right? If 0, this is being coerced into false. It is the same thing as that, okay?
Would like a not equal 10 coerce it into false?
This?
No, a line break.
So if I put a bang 10, then we would get the no, right? Because opposite 10, opposite of its truthiness, so false, right? Just like bang 0, we get the yes.
And the bang would be inside or outside the parentheses?
Inside the parentheses, right in front of the number, right in front of the string, right in front of the Boolean, right in front of the value, okay? Always inside of the parentheses, you put the bang. So here, you can see that a double bang isn't really necessary, since the if statement is already coercing it into a Boolean, right? However, the bang could be used like a little trickery, you know?
Can you give an example of when you would do that? The bang and make it opposite?
Like, here's an example. Like, let's say you were looking through an array of 50,000 things and you're looking for only things that are 0. So you would write an if statement, if bang variable.
Yeah.
Then you would do that little logic that you have to do, you know? But like, you know, there's a time and a place for it.
Except for double E.
Yeah, no, there's no time or place for that. I don't want any of that. Also, no vars. If I see somebody using vars. No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, don't use var. You guys will talk about, I think Sulamita will talk to you guys about that when we talk about scope. Okay? There is a difference between let and var. You guys will learn about that tomorrow, I think. Okay? No vars. No vars.
Meaning that it's up.
So console.log, bang true, we get false, bang ABC, bang 100, bang this array, bang this object. Opposite opposite truthiness, so we get false, right? And it's coercing those values into true or false. Okay? Whereas double bang gives you what they are. Same thing, except it reflects the truthiness, right? What it is. But it is coercing the value, okay? This is shorthand for coercing. You can also, instead of double bang, use capital Boolean, right, to coerce it. But this is really fast, right? Cool? Nope. So logical operators also coerce values to Booleans. Well, no, they don't. So if 10 and 20, right? That means it's going to return the 20, which the if will coerce into a Boolean, okay? And I proved that to you. I proved that was wrong. This is wrong. I proved that, I'll edit this later. I proved that to you when I said const, what is this, equal 10 and 20 and 30, right? It wasn't true, it was 30, right? The and doesn't coerce anything. It just returns values. So ignore this. But it can be used inside of if statements, right? If 10 and 0. 0 is falsy because it returns the first falsy thing it finds. The first falsy thing and sees when it's comparing these two things is 0. So it returns the 0 inside of the if statement. If 0, coerce the 0 into false. If false, no. Console.log 0 is false.
It's of course.
It's a lot of things going on, okay? But it's very useful to check to see if two things are false, right? These two values have like a not null value. These two strings have length. These two numbers aren't 0. Make sure that's true, and then we go into the if statement, okay? And returns the first falsy value or the last value if all are truthy. Let return value 1 equal 10 and apples and 0 and no. Console.log return value is return value. 0, not null. 0. Because 0 is the first one we see. 0 is the first falsy value we see. Down here we have lucky number 7, so we get 7. Because lucky number 7, they are all truthy, two strings with length, and a number, which isn't 0. So the last thing is that number, so that's what return value 2 is going to be. It actually returns the value. It does not coerce it. Does this make sense? I feel like it's a little confusing, but you guys will get the hang of this really quick. And sometimes this stuff confuses me too sometimes, logical operators. Because as you will grow, you'll be using them to solve more complex things, you know?
And the first one is returning the first falsy value, right? And the second one returning the last true.
Last truthy thing. Yes. First falsy thing, last truthy thing. So, or is completely different, right? Or returns the first truthy thing and the last falsy thing. So the first truthy thing is happy. So we get happy, right? Because null and undefined coerced into booleans is false. So we see happy coerced into a boolean is true. So that's what we get into return value 1. Return value 2, false, null, 10 is less than 0 is an expression that's false, and then NaN. So we get NaN over there. Because all of these things evaluate the false if coerced into a boolean. So we get NaN at the end, because that's the last thing. Like when you're really thinking about using these things in your problems, just say it out loud, because it actually makes sense. If this is truthy, or this is truthy, if one of those things is truthy, then we will run the if statement. If, and only if, this thing is truthy and this thing is truthy. Both things are truthy. They both have to be truthy, so we run the if, right? Just say it out loud to yourself. Okay? It'll help you. Instead of like just staring at these things and thinking why. Just say it out loud. This and this and this, okay? It'll help, really. Yeah.
So the second false, or no? The return is no,
If I didn't have these,
right,
the return value would be null. Yeah.
I mean, so,
Yeah, so false or null returns null, and then null or 10 is less than 0 returns false. Because 10 less than 0, the less than returns a boolean, right? So 10 less than 0 does return false, so null or false, we get false. False or not a number, we get not a number. Right? Left to right. Any questions? It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
We got types, explicit coercion, implicit coercion, concatenation, loose equality, never use it, coercion to Boolean, which values are truthy, falsy, conditional expressions, bang operator, and logical operators. Any last questions?
can you see?
Oh, you guys have to do a lot of work right now. Everyone good? Yes, take like a 5-minute break. I'll slag out pairs, and then we can all get started.
Your last name is Weissman?
Lisa.
Lisa.